And I think we're on. This is so exciting. Hello everyone, welcome to Wineless Live. This is, where are we? May. We're in May. Who'd have thought? But we're drinking May wines this evening. So this is the tasting where you get your May wines and we go through them. I'm Isabelle, I work at the Wine List and I'm in a very special location. I feel like Nigella today. I'm actually in Fiona Wine List's kitchen. So it's extra exciting because usually I don't have so much space, but I can be writing the tasting card at the same time as you this time. So what we are doing tonight is we have two very special wines. So one is Sivina. So this is the one you'll have received in your May box. And this is a wine from Mallorca in Spain. And the second wine we have is the Earth Beneath Our Feet Syrah. So this is a South African wine. And what we're going to do is we're going to drink the white wine first. We're going to talk about it, talk about the background. You should all have a tasting card like this. And we'll basically go through the tasting card, but only roughly. If you're a beginner, if you've never been to this sort of Wine List Live before, we will go through the tasting card. We'll break it down. We'll show you how to taste wine, how to drink it, what to look for inside it. But if you have been before, and I can already see Hannah, Sarah and Tim are already in comments saying hello. Hi, welcome back. It's lovely to see you again. It's always lovely having you in the comments. So do say hello. It's very, very nice. I'm reading them on the side, but my screen is very far away. So I am slightly squinting, but if you just write in caps lock, I should be fine. I'm just kidding. I've got a screen here too. I'm just being lazy. So we'll be chatting about the wines in general, about what makes the wines exactly like how they are, because they are really interesting ones, these two. And we also have, in the comments, we should have both of our winemakers. So we're going to have Carla for a white wine from Fangar Vineyards. And Sam is from the Earth Beneath Our Feet, so he'll be joining us later too. He might even be here now, to be honest. But hello to both of you. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions for Carla and Sam, put it in the comments, ask away, go for it, go all out. Sarah says, nice kitchen, Fiona. Thanks for hosting us, Fiona. If you've ever emailed into the Wine List, you'll have probably spoken to Fiona. So you all probably know Fiona at some point. So let's get started and just drink loads of wine, because it feels like one of those days when you want to drink wine. It's a very nice hot sunny day. If you're watching this afterwards, it was a lovely day today, so I hope it is for you too, but let's drink some wine. So, the first wine that we have is, well actually, when we had our tasting last month, so with the April wines, we had complete opposites in terms of wines. We had one really complex, a lot going on inside that Marada Chardonnay, and the complete opposite with our red, so it was a really fresh, easy drinking red. Too easy drinking, it's wonderful. And we're going for complete opposites again. So with our white wine this time, it's local grape varieties from the island of Mallorca. You don't find them anywhere else in the world really. And because Mallorca has so few vineyards, they don't really export any of their wines, so you can't really find it outside of Mallorca. But we'll talk a bit about the general style anyway and where you can find things similar. And we have a complete opposite again, and that is Syrah from South Africa. You can get Syrah in absolutely, I was going to say almost any country in the world, but definitely not in England, but in so many countries across the entire planet. So one is very niche and specific, and one is so broad and general, so you can really start to learn about Syrah. So we're going opposite again, but that's the best way to learn, to go complete opposites each time. So hello to Carla, who's saying hello in the comments. That's Carla, if everyone wants to say hello to Carla. Thank you for joining us. So where we are in Spain, should I show you a little map? We'll do. Has anyone been on a holiday to Mallorca? You'll know exactly where it is from my map here. So this is Spain, as you well know. And if you look to the right hand side of that picture, that is the island of Mallorca. So it's in the Balearic Islands, and it's a few islands, but Mallorca is the biggest one in the middle of those islands. So I won't lie, I didn't draw the other islands in because I thought, let's just look at Mallorca with this one. But as you can see, just there is Fangar Vineyard. So Fangar Vineyard is absolutely huge, to be honest. It's a ginormous vineyard. They're really famous for their horse competitions as well as their wine growing. So it's owned by, it was owned by a German businessman called Peter Eisenman. But he sold it on now, and it's this enormous, enormous place. They have a beautiful castle, and it dates back to the 14th century, having plantings on the vineyard here. But these days, they're doing some really fun, exciting stuff. And I'll show you a little picture of this one as well. So, sorry, this screen is so far away. There you go. So this is Fangar vineyard. And as you can see, is they've got their bicycles. So they have loads of bicycles on the vineyard because they're really, really focused on having a really natural environment. They have as few chemicals as possible. They really believe in looking after nature. And as you can see, there's rose bushes there. These are really, really important. So rose bushes, you might have seen them in quite a few vineyards. And what they do is they plant them on the very end of a row of vines. And they've done this for centuries, for a very long time. And the reason is roses are very, very perceptible to many diseases, and also mildew, rot, and also when you have the little bugs that come in, the little aphids, flies, they get attracted to the roses before the vines. So the roses are acting as that sort of first point of call for a winemaker to know how healthy his vineyard is. It's like, you know, in the olden days when people would go down to a mine and they'd take a canary with them, because the canary was very sort of perceptible to any changes in the atmosphere, in the air. So if the canary stopped singing, they knew that some danger was coming, and they'd all head back up to the surface. And it's exactly like that with roses on a vineyard. So because roses are so fragile and delicate, they're the first sort of warning sign. If something happens to your roses on that vine, it means that danger is coming from the vine. So a winemaker knows exactly where to go, exactly where to stop sort of any mildew, rot, any bugs that are attacking the vines because of their roses. So it's a really, really useful thing. They use it less so now, and that's because they found that it's a different species of mildew that attacks roses to vines. But if you've got the right conditions for mildew for roses, you've probably got similar conditions for vines. They still tend to use it in quite a few places. You'll see it all over sort of Bordeaux and France and everything. It's really pretty, but it is very useful as well. Another reason why they do this with their roses is so that they can have more biodiversity on the vineyard. So they really encourage having bees on the vineyard, and bees, they don't need bees to pollinate the actual vines, because the vines are hermaphrodite species, so it means that they don't need something like a bee to pollinate it to carry on growing. They're completely self-sufficient. But they use bees because it increases the biodiversity, that you want lots of insects in your vineyard, because they all do tiny different jobs. And bees, they love this sweet grape juice. So what they do is, if there is a grape which has a tear inside it, if you left that grape, it would get mouldy and it would rot and it would be really, really terrible. It might even spread diseases. But a bee will notice this little tear inside the grape, and they will suck out all that sweet, sweet juice because it's so delicious, and they will completely take the grape dry. And this completely shields it from any rot. So it's actually a really wonderful thing to have bees on your vineyard, which is so, so good. So, oh, Sarah's saying, Carly, your wine is lovely. I think so too. Should we start drinking it? Yeah. Even though the bees are great, we would like to drink some wine as well. So if you want to pour it out, this one is Savina. So Sivina means grey, and this is a local wine, local grape varieties, but let's just cheers and taste anyway. We'll break it down in a minute, but cheers everyone. Cling. Cheers, Fiona. She's literally there. Chin chin. Oh. Now, I've had mine out of the fridge a little while, so it's really started to warm up. And when you have this wine very cold, the last time I had it really cold straight out the fridge, and it felt like such a clean, fresh holiday wine. Now that I've let it warm up and sort of open up as well, the temperature means that you can get more flavours and more texture out of your wine. So the colder it is, the less you can taste. The warmer it is with your white wine, the more you can taste. So I really recommend warming your glass up in your hand. It'll really help you. because my goodness, the flavours that I'm getting out of this, it's wonderful. There's so much texture in there as well. But we will break it down. We'll break it down now. Oh, cheers everyone. Cheers Sam and Charlotte and Hannah and Sophie and Sam. Cheers. So what we're going to do is we are going to break down our tasting card. So on this side, you've got loads of information about it. So you've got a little bit about the winemaker, Daniel. He's got my favourite phrase, bottling liquid art. I like that. It's got personality. Then you have food pairings to go with it as well. So I've picked out some perfect food pairings to go with this wine, and I hope you're having them. Let me know if you are having them anyway, because I'll be very jealous. And then you have a little bit of trivia and a bit about the grape and region. But we will be looking on this side with the characteristics and the circles here. So the first one that we always look at is colour. And the reason why we want to look at colour is this the easiest thing to tell you about your wine before you even take a sip, even though we have, but no one's going to hold us back from this. But the colour, we're just going to look over the top of our tasting card, and you hold it at a 45-degree angle over your piece of paper and look over the top. So you're comparing it to exact bright white, and you can see that it's got a little bit of yellow, a little bit of gold to it, but really quite light in colour. I'd say it's like a tiny little bit at the scale. If this is out of 10, I'd give it like a 2 out of 10 in colour. Really quite a light wine. Do you agree? Yeah, we agree. Then tannin, cross out tannin because white wine doesn't have any tannin at all. And my favourite one that we're going to look at is acidity. So in Mallorca, it's a really, really hot island. I am really jealous because they have 300 days of sunshine every single year. 300 days, and the average temperature is about 21 degrees. So when you're in Mallorca, quite often, because they don't export their wines that often, it means that they're drinking a lot of their own wines. And when you're in a hot country on holiday, you want those wines that are really high acidity. You want them to feel refreshing. High acidity wines make your mouth water and it feels a bit more rejuvenating. You don't really want a low acidity wine on a holiday in a very lovely hot country on a nice hot beach. So the way to test our acidity, most of you will already know if you've done this before, but if you are new, what we're going to do is take a sip of the wine, swallow it, and then open your mouth and tilt your head forward like this, and count how many seconds it takes before you need to close your mouth before you're going to dribble on yourself, basically. You don't have to actually dribble, don't worry, you can close your mouth just before that, but we'll all do it. Cheers. Three seconds and my mouth is watering quite a lot now. There was definitely a pause before that. It was a slight delay. Your mouth sort of noticed you're drinking wine and then all of that acidity kicks in. So it's about 3 seconds. What's everyone else thinking? Oh, Tim says, how ancient is it? Is that how ancient the Fangar vineyard is? Or the wine, the grape variety? Let me know in the comment, but I'll tell you all three. The castle dates back several hundred years. Not sure exactly when, but it's a huge castle. There's lots of secrecy around it. Couldn't find out an exact date for the castle, but it's very, very pretty. And the vineyard itself, so it's back to the 14th century when they had vines on there, but they sort of disappeared over the centuries. Sometimes they'd come back. Some people would sort of dabble in winemaking, but Peter Eisenman and Daniel, the winemaker, they put loads of work into sort of rejuvenating, putting life back into the whole vineyard. And that was only sort of 12 years ago, maybe just a bit before then. But that's when they really sort of took over and did a lot of work on this vineyard. And they really cared about nature as well, so it's been really sort of organic for that whole time as well. Not even many tractors on there, it's a lot by hand, all taking bicycles. I'll actually show you them on the bicycles. But this is them. When I say not much use of tractors, I really mean it. They say that they love sports in the vineyard, so they're definitely using a lot of bicycles around there. Luckily, it's not too hilly on the vineyard. Mallorca itself is a very hilly island, and that's why it has such a microclimate, because you have the mountains and you have the sea. You're sort of trapped in the middle of having hot but so much wind coming up from the sea, the Mediterranean Sea, that it really cools the vineyard down, because it can be sort of 40 degrees all summer, but because it's so windy, it makes it a much cooler vineyard. So everyone is agreeing. 3 to 4 seconds for the, 3 seconds. 3 to 4 seconds for the acidity there. And it's really nice and fresh. So we had a bit of a delay, but then we got all that acidity that we were looking for and wanted. So the next thing is sweetness. And sweetness is quite scientific when it comes to wine, because it's basically about how many grams of sugar are in your wine per litre. So if you're sort of between 0 and 17, that's a dry wine. 17 to 35 grams of sugar per litre, medium wine. Oh no, off dry, 35 plus, medium, and then 120 plus, all the way at the other end. If we reach that far, that's when you have a sweet wine. So in relation, Coca-Cola is about 100 grams of sugar per litre. So that's sort of at the sweet end of the scale. Where do you think this one is? Do you think this is sweet? Do you think this is dry? Do you think it's somewhere in the middle of the two? Have a little taste. It's always hard to tell, because sometimes you can smell really sweet, ripe fruit aromas that completely throws you off. Hi Emily, I love how Emily's coming back saying wineless holiday. We've got a long list of countries now that we need to go to for a wineless holiday. Every time I meet winemakers, I'm like, can I come? And can we all come and visit? Oh, and Sarah's up for it too. Lovely. One day. So the grape varieties that we have in here. While you're figuring out about sweetness, I'll tell you about the grape varieties, but we have two. One is Prensal Blanc and one is Giraud Ross. So when we were talking about that acidity, Prensal Blanc had really low acidity as a grape. It's naturally low, but can feel quite full, very tropical in terms of wine. Giraud Ross is much higher in terms of acidity, and it ages really well. So when we're talking about the acidity inside this wine, you've got that perfect balance of the two. It's 83% Giraud Ross, 17% Prensal Blanc, and you can feel that you've got the balance between the two. Prensal Blanc is lower in acidity, so it's bringing it down a bit, but because of all of that Giraud Ross, it's really bringing really fresh acidity. So you can tell that percentage. So, Carla's filled me in. The plot has been farmed since the 14th century. I did not know it's only had 3 owners in this whole time. My goodness, 3 owners since the 14th century. That is absolutely incredible. Wow. It is a really beautiful place though. It's really nice. As you can see from those photos with the lovely rose bushes. Makes you want to visit. So, what are we thinking sweetness? Everyone's saying dry so far. Oh, Paul said mid to slightly sweet. And I know what you mean about that, because when I tasted it, especially the warmer you have it, you can sort of taste some really sweet flavours going on inside it. But this is actually a dry wine, but you can definitely taste, it's that sort of tropical fruit flavour you're getting from the Prensal Blanc. And it's another little thing, which we'll talk about in a second, which is making it feel a bit plumper and sweeter. But it is a dry wine, this one. Low in sugar. I'm going to say low in calories. It's not, but we don't need to think about that. So what I do want to tell you about though is the body. So when we talk about white wine, body, if it's light in body, it's like skimmed milk, it's clean, it cuts through, it's like water. And if it's full-bodied wine, it's like full fat milk. It's about how the mouth feels, how it sits in your mouth. If it feels fuller and rounder, it's more full-bodied. So when you're tasting this one, definitely warm it up in your hand a little bit first, just to make sure you can get the most of that texture coming out of it. But does it feel like water and skimmed milk and light body, or does it have that sort of full rounded feel to it? I'll have another sip. I think this is a bit full. Yeah. You can go, so if you think about your parameters on either side so that you know whereabouts you are on the scale. But if you think of the super light one, like your sort of classic Pickpool or a really young New Zealand Sauvignon, or Pinot Grigio, wines like that are really light in body, things without any aging to them. When you have the really full-bodied wines, those are things like those big sort of South African aged Chenin Blanc, really oak-aged Australian Chardonnay. You can be really, really full-bodied. So where are we in the middle? Everyone's saying sort of medium. Yeah, I think medium. This is sort of exactly at the halfway point. And interestingly, the colder I had it made me think it was much lighter in body. But now the warmer you have it, mine's probably sort of 10 degrees now. It's been out of the fridge for ages. But you can really feel how plump it is. It feels more like that perfect green cap semi-skimmed milk. Wonderful plump wine. And the reason for this is because it has a little bit of aging inside American oak. So when you age wine inside an oak barrel, it changes the texture of it and it can make it feel more full. So this one has only been aged mostly inside stainless steel, but they've taken 10% of those grapes and aged them inside a big American oak barrel. And what that means is it's just oak from a normal oak tree, but the oak tree is an American species of oak. And when you have French oak, which is the usual one that we have, or before we had Bulgarian oak, and we've even had Czech oak before as well. But the main ones that you talk about are French oak and American oak, and they give different flavours. So French oak is more sort of cream, vanilla, baking spices, and American oak is very much sort of coconut, caramel, and cream as well. So it's definitely not quite those flavours yet. We're definitely not quite getting coconut yet, although I wish we did because I love coconut. Might be a bit too much. But they've aged it inside older oak, so it's not, and because it's only 10%, it's not that full-on oak flavour that you can sometimes get when you age a wine in a brand new barrel. It's like when you first chop down a tree. I've never chopped down a tree. It's like when you have a brand new chair in your room, and it's a brand new wooden chair or a brand new wooden piece of furniture, and you can smell it. And it's the same when you have wine barrels. If it's a really new piece of wood, you can smell it and taste it in the wine. The older the wood is, the less you can smell and taste. So this is changing the body. It's giving it a bit of this sort of, when, I think, who was it who said it earlier? And we said that it was maybe a little bit of sweet flavour to it. I don't think it's actual sugar in the wine, but it's that sort of sweetness you get from oak aging. Can you taste a bit of sort of toasty, brioche, bready? So the flavours from this, there's a lot of things going on. So we've got our malolactic fermentation, we've got oak aging, lees aging, but between the three of them, you're definitely getting this sort of extra texture to it. So that's where our body's coming from, the American oak aging, the main thing. And where is the finish on this wine? Finish is the thing that I look at first when I try a wine. I know it's the wrong way around to do it, to have finish first. But it's the easiest and quickest way to look at how good quality your wine is. So what you do, you take yet another sip and swallow it straight away and count how many seconds you can really taste the flavour for. And the longer you can taste that flavour, the longer the finish is, the more you can, the more quality it is usually. Usually when you have a lesser well-made wine, it's got a very short finish to it. It can only last sort of 2 seconds and the flavour disappears. The longer the finish, the better it's been looked after. So where do you think this one is? Oh, interestingly, everyone's saying sort of medium on body. Denise, Hannah, Sarah, Emily, everyone, but Charlotte and Sam are saying they thought it was lighter to medium, but theirs was quite chilled. So that's really interesting. So warm it up in your hands a little bit and see how the temperature changes. What you could even do is leave a glass out. When we have our red wines shortly, you can leave a glass of your white wine out and sort of come back to it in sort of 20 minutes time. It'll really warm up by then, and then you can really sort of get the texture out of it. So so Carla's saying the Giro Ross grape variety, which is the main one inside this, has really had quite a bit of barrel aging to it. So it's getting really sort of full, really plump. There's a lot going on inside it. So what's everyone's finish on it? I'll test it again. I've already written it down, but we'll try. Hannah's saying, oh, we've got two very different answers here. Paul's saying 5 to 6. Hannah, It's saying 12 to 13 seconds on this one. Oh my goodness, what's everyone else saying? Sarah's saying it's really interesting how the barrels are so different. And when you make wine and you talk about where the terroir, where the grape comes from, and how even when you have similar species of grapes, if you grow it in a different sort of environment, it can really change how the grape tastes. And wood is exactly the same. So when you're aging, when you're growing oak trees, because they take so long to grow as well, they really sort of absorb environmental changes around them. So if you're growing an American species in one part of the world and a French species in another part of the world, they will be such different types of tree. So when you chop it down to be the wood barrel at the end, they'll be completely different and have a completely different effect on wine. You can also age wine inside cherry wood, different types of wood, but they don't add as much flavour or body or texture to it. Oak does probably the most, but the perfect amount, the perfect balance. Cherry wood doesn't really do as much to it. But historically, you'll see a few wine regions around where they sort of use cherry wood from cherry trees, and it's just because it's the local wood, so it's easy to get hold of. Because oak is very expensive, it's difficult to grow, it takes a long time to grow, so aging something in oak is a really expensive thing to do, really. So what's everyone else saying about the finish? Ooh, 10. We've got really long finishes here, so we've got a mixture, 11, 9, 7, 8 to 10. I think we're all around the same boat. I have put 8 to 9, I'll say 8. Really lovely long finish. You know what, I'm going to give it a 9. I can still really taste it sort of lingering around. So it's got a lovely, it's been really well looked after. And that's in the vineyard when it's a grape, a little baby grapeling when it's growing up, needs to be well looked after. And well handled, so that's why they're sort of picking by hand. It means that you don't get much crushing of the grapes and they're taken straight away to be processed and made into a grape. And they're being well looked after in the winery itself and having that lovely little bit of aging to it. So it's all concentrating the grape down and making a really nice quality grape. We'll talk more about this with our red wine because the two have some big similarities between the two. Big similarities, opposite, but also the same. Same and different. I read Paul's comment wrong. He's getting 8-ish now, wonderful. I thought you said I'm getting fish now. I was like, Fiona thought it too. We just need glasses, to be honest. But okay, good. 8-ish seconds. Amazing. I'm so pleased. What a great long finish to that wine. And we'll talk about flavours in the wine. So when we talked about those sort of flavours coming from the oak aging, hold off on that. We'll talk about the first circle first. The first circle is, these are really simple sort of flavours. These are fruits, flowers, and if you look at the right hand side of that first circle, you've got floral, you've got apple, lemon, peach, lychee. These are all the flavours that you're going to find inside a white wine. Every single wine will taste of fruit. So what fruit are you tasting inside this one? Again, always smell the fruit in your wine first because it's usually the easiest thing to smell and to look for. I always go straight away to sort of, does the wine smell of lemon? Because every single white wine smells of lemon. It's a certain compound that you find. It's citronelle inside your white wine. So when you break your white wine down into its chemical components, there'll always be citronelle inside white wine, which is the same chemical component found inside lemons. So your brain cleverly matches them up and says, that smells like lemons. So I always like to start with lemons. Once you can smell lemon, what else can you smell? Is it getting more tropical? Is it more orchard fruits? More citrusy still? And then Hannah just said, I think I've just heard the cutest word in winemaking. A grapeling. I'm not sure if that's a real word, so maybe don't use that. But you know what? Shakespeare made his own words up, so why can't the rest of us, to be honest? A baby little grapeling. Emily is saying apple, honeysuckle, apricot, and minerality. Yes. And then Sam and Charlotte are saying pineapple. Similar ones, apricot, pear, lychee. Yes. So I think we're all agreeing that this is really getting quite tropical, this wine. We have all those sort of, what I like to call northern fruits, like apples and pears, more northern fruits, things that you grow in England. And then we're going a little bit different. We're getting more tropical fruits, pineapple, lychee, it's coming out. And because of this really hot climate, it means that you're going to get some tropical fruits. So there's a compound called thiols, which is a sulfur compound that appears inside fermentation. And when you have thiols inside your wine, it means that you're going to get more tropical fruit aromas inside your wine. And thiols appear when you have more UV rays. And they've got loads of UV rays in Mallorca. As we said, they've got 300 days of sunshine every year. Carla, I'm really jealous. But it means that you're going to get a lot of thiols in your fermentation inside your winemaking. So we're going to get those tropical fruit aromas coming through. And we're all saying exactly that. Ben B, mango, ooh, butter. You're in the next circle, Ben B. And let's go to that circle now. So these are all our fruit flavours. We've named loads of them as well, so it means that this wine's got some good depth to it. It's got a lot going on. The second circle is when it gets more interesting, as we very well know, because I love wines that have something from a second circle. And these are the more bizarre aromas. So when we were talking about our oak aging, and I said that it's got a little bit of toastiness, almost like toast, almonds, brioche. Can everyone smell that? These are flavours from the second circle. It means that it's any aroma that isn't a fruit aroma. It's something more complex. So Ben said it, he said butter. Yeah, from that lees aging. Lees aging is when it makes it feel a bit buttery, creamy, round, your malolactic fermentation. I was looking at Fiona then going, it makes it creamy, and she went, I'm not sure. It does, yeah, we can taste it. And then everyone who's saying sort of, yeah, Hannah who's saying cedar, yeast, stone. These are our complex aromas. So interestingly, Hannah and Emily both said stone and minerality. And it's really got that. So minerality is when it tastes a bit like stone and steel, which always sounds odd because who knows what stone and steel tastes like, but we all do. And it tastes like this wine. Sam and Charlotte said a little bit of vanilla. And that is from your oak aging. So even though we say that usually the flavours are separated between American oak and French oak, it can still feel a little bit vanilla-y. I was less vanilla on this one because when you have a French oak aging wine, you go, yeah, that's vanilla. But I feel like there were flavours before I got vanilla in this one. I felt it was more sort of brioche-y, toasty. You know, like when you make a piece of toast but with really sort of cheap white, the crappy bread that's really good for bacon sandwiches, you make toast out of that. And it's like a sweet version of toast. It smells like that. Definitely. So Ruth has asked, is it only classed as a complex wine if you have flavours from the second circle? Spot on. Yes, exactly that. So if you have a wine with flavours just from the first circle, so it means that it's just sort of fruit flavours, a little bit of floral maybe, that is what we call a simple wine. Nothing wrong with a simple wine. They're very delicious and sometimes incredibly well made as well, and they can be expensive too. But it means it's a simple wine. It's not had anything extra done to it. Every single wine that you'll ever make will be the first circle. And a winemaker has to make a choice to do something, to actively do something to their wines to get flavours from the second circle. So these will be the more complex ones, the ones that aren't fruit basically, and that's what we call complex flavours. So my favourite wines, they're usually the more expensive ones as well because you have more processes to do to achieve those complex flavours. So they're usually more expensive. But some of my favourite wines are complex, but I love simple wines as well. It's all about situational wine pairing. Sometimes on a lovely, easy, simple day, you just want a simple wine. Our Duzat from last month, the red wine, is a really good example of that. It was one of my... I love that wine so much. It's wonderful. I think we only have about 7 bottles left in the warehouse. It's flown. I think I drank most of it. But, but that one was a simple wine. Beautiful, but simple, easy. So, touch of chamomile, says Carla. Yes, that lovely floral note to it. Thank you. And Denise says she agrees. She's got some brioche. Yeah, cabbage. Maybe not. Yeah, a little bit herbal. I think we're all agreeing there's so many flavours inside this. And the 4 things to look for a great wine. Complexity, yes. Depth of flavour, are you listing lots? Yes. A long finish? Yes. And do all those characteristics balance out really nicely? Yeah, they all feel really well balanced inside this wine. So that is all 4 ticks. A great, great wine. But I loved that, it was so good. Really good wine with food as well. Absolutely delicious with food. So we will move on to our red wine now because I've got so much to talk about with both of them. But thank you so much, Carla, for joining us. It was really lovely to have you. Hopefully you'll have all of us coming over to visit as soon as we can. And I hope it doesn't fall on those 65 days of rain that you have in a year. Hopefully not, we'll be fine. But with that, we will be moving on to our red wines. So you can carry on sipping your white wine if you want to. You can even pause this and come back and watch it later. But our red wine is the Earth Beneath Our Feet Syrah. So if you want to pour this one out into a glass, open it up. If you have been questioning whether to decant this one, sorry, I'll pour yours as well. If you've been questioning whether to decant it or not, you don't need to decant this one. You can, but I wouldn't recommend decanting it. I always find when you decant a wine, it starts to lose its aromas as soon as you start decanting it because it's in contact with oxygen. So a little bit of sort of contact with air, swilling it around your glass, does wonders for a wine. Opens it up, lets it breathe and come out, lets the aroma sort of drift into your glass. Sometimes you can over decant a red wine a little bit though, and you start to lose some of the delicate red fruit aromas. So no problem if you have, but I probably wouldn't recommend it this one, even though it is full bodied and it's already 5 years old. I'd usually say that's sort of the tipping point where you can start to decant and it'll get a bit better. I think this one's so well balanced. I think as soon as you open it, it's so well balanced that you don't need to do anything to sort of improve on that. It's already fantastic. I'll let you decide on that. But thank you so much, Carla. Everyone's saying thank you, Carla. But now we're having a Syrah. Carla, I wish we sent you a bottle of Syrah so you could join in with us as well. That would have been fun. But shipping to Mallorca would have been a nightmare, to be honest. So Syrah, you'll have all had Syrah before because it is a very famous grape variety. It's grown all over the world in so many different countries: Australia, France, New Zealand, Argentina, America, in sort of California, all over Europe, everywhere really. And Syrah has 2 different names. So Syrah is the French name for it and Shiraz is the English name for it. So if you're making Syrah in Australia, they usually call it Shiraz. If you're making it in France, Syrah. And in most other countries, they sort of pick and choose which one they want to call it. And they usually do this by basing it, is it more like a French style old world Syrah, and they'll call it Syrah, or is it more like a new world Australian Shiraz, and then they'll call it a Shiraz. So they'll sort of pick and choose what they put on their bottle. And interestingly, we have this wine from Franschhoek, which has some French influences, so they've gone for the name Syrah in this one. So, okay, so we've got a good question from Ruth. Ruth, you've got some great questions. So to clarify, should we decant older or younger wines generally? It's sort of a tipping point between the two. My advice is always open the bottle, taste it. If the characteristics feel nicely balanced, tannins and everything, mainly focus on tannins there. If it feels nicely balanced and the sort of fruits feel nice and plump and juicy, you don't really need to decant it. If it's very young, sort of 3 years old and has really over the top tannins and it feels really harsh and sort of like rough paper, I would decant it. If it's still full bodied, it will be if it has that much tannin. Well, not too full, medium. Ignore that. Okay, so if you have quite a lot of tannin and it's young, if you decant it and leave it with the oxygen contact, oxygen will start to soften those tannins out, so it'll rebalance the wine for you and help you out a little bit. So if it's really young and feeling harsh, decant it. If you have a really old wine, so if it's getting to sort of 7 years old, if it's full bodied, and if you open it and taste it and it feels wonderfully balanced but a bit closed, sometimes you don't get the fruit flavours straight away. It feels just a bit, it's hard to describe how I mean, but when you smell this, you can smell the fruit straight away. But sometimes an old wine can feel very closed off and benefits from just opening up for a little while to sort of let the fruit flavours, it's sort of like being shocked from being inside the bottle, it needs to sort of open up and breathe again. Then I would decant it as well. And the third one, if it has a lot of sediment in the bottle, then I would decant it purely for the sediment. You don't have to leave it for any time then, just so that you get the sediment in the bottle and the nice wine in the decanter. So those are the 3 occasions that I would decant really. Actually, I'm going to add another one. When you have a really full-bodied white wine, really full-bodied, really nicely aged with a white wine, can really benefit from decanting as well, like a really nice Chardonnay, a nice Burgundy, they're good. So, Syrah. Okay, I was so glad you did this as a comparison. So Syrah had a little bit left in the bottle and a little bit that she decanted. And it tastes completely different, doesn't it? It does depend on your personal preference and on how you feel that day as to which one you want. Sometimes you want something that's just been left out and is a bit softer. Usually I want that sort of initial fruit flavour, that lovely juicy flavours that you get from opening a bottle straight away. So yeah, always have a little go, everyone. If you just buy a second bottle of this, decant half of it, keep the other half in the bottle and see what the difference is. Really interesting. Tim says, has it got anything to do with the city in Iran? It does. People think, so the city in Iran is called Shiraz, which is the name of the grape variety, and no one actually knows because we can't track the evidence, so we're not certain for sure. But we think that it came from Iran because a lot of grapes were grown over there for literally the past few thousand years. So they think that it came from Iran. The name, well, a sort of parent grape to it, but Syrah Shiraz was actually a French grape variety, so it's mainly come around in France. But yeah, could be slightly to do with the name, we're not too sure on that. No one is, unfortunately. So David says, it's like Ribena. Shall we drink it? Shall we see if David's right? Cheers, everyone. Chin chin. Cheers. Cling. Oh. Oh. So we do have Sam in the comments. And Sam will be in the comments because he is from the Earth Beneath Our Feet. So the Earth Beneath Our Feet, they are a collective. So they're based in South Africa and they rent a lot of vineyard space. And they have a person to look after each individual parcel of wine. So it's a really interesting concept because it means that instead of being a wine grower and having to look after vast amounts of acreage and also look after all these grapes, travel around the whole of the vineyard and be a great wine grower as well. It's a lot to do when you're a winemaker. You've got to be very, very skilled at all these different parts. What's really interesting with the Earth Beneath Our Feet is they're a collective. They bring in a lot of really talented people. Each person is in charge of their own little bit that they love being in charge of. So they're doing their very best job at that part and then passing over the next part to the next person, so they get to really focus and hone in on their skills. So they are based in Franschhoek in South Africa. So it's I'll show you a little map. It's the very, very bottom of South Africa. So, oops, wrong thing. Whoops, slipped. So this is South Africa, and that is Franschhoek down there. So it's just next to Cape Town, but it's a very hilly region actually, and it's got some really poor soil. But when we think about Syrah, there's a phrase with Syrah where it's Syrah likes a view. It's such a lovely phrase, but it's because Syrah likes to be on top of a hillside. And when you're on the very top of a hill, you've got the poorest soil. It's crap soil up there. It's very thin, can be very rocky, it's very windy up there. But Syrah thrives off that. It absolutely loves it. So I'll show you a little picture actually. So this is a picture of the wine grower. So when we're talking about Earth Beneath Our Feet, it's split up into different people doing their different sections of each part. So this vineyard, this few hectares of land is looked after by Stan, and this is Stan. He has the same name as my dad, and he looks after it. So you can already see, I mean, it doesn't actually look as steep on here, but in the next photo I'll show you, it's such a steep set of vines that he looks after. It's a really treacherous path to get up there because it's really rocky, very, very steep, full of cobras all the time. And it's got really poor soil, which means that the Syrah absolutely loves it. I'll show you another photo so you can see. That's how steep it is. Very, very steep. He's probably about 2 meters away, but it's about 10 meters down. So Syrah absolutely loves it here. And when we look at Syrah grown all over the world, it's always in those sort of hilly climbs. It's in those really rocky areas. And it also needs heat. So when you look at Barossa in Australia, extreme heat, pretty crap soil. Syrah absolutely loves it, concentrates their berries. If you look at France, all of Côte d'Rhône, well, Rhône Valley is Syrah, and Syrah thrives there because it's hot, it's hilly, it's rocky, lots of different soil varieties. Actually, I will show you something, but if anybody does want to do some more Syrah, if you really liked this Syrah, we're actually doing a by the glass tasting of, it's not Syrah, it's a blend of Syrah. So we're basically doing a Rhône Valley tasting. So I've bought some really, really nice bottles of Rhône Valley wine. I actually opened one of the boxes today. It's a 1997 Chateauneuf de Pape. And it was like dusty, but like real 1997 dust. But Rhône Valley is basically a blend of Syrah and other things. It's very similar to this wine. And I'll show you our by the glass tastings that we have. But we've got Rhône wines that's coming up on Wednesday the 19th. So we're going to do 5 glasses of different Rhône wines, have a look at all the appellations inside Rhône. There's Chateauneuf de Pape, Côte Rôtie, Crozes-Hermitage. Then we're doing 5 red villages of Burgundy, which is incredible red Burgundy. We've got like a 2004, a 2012, all from different villages. And we're doing a Pinot Noir around the world as well. So that is just, because Pinot Noir is so fussy as a grape, but we're just showing basically how different it can be from country to country. It is radically different, Pinot Noir. But if you do want to join them, it'll be very fun, let me know. There'll be a link that you can use and it's on our website as well, so you can just book along, have a tasting, and it's by the glass, so you can just do it by yourself or with a person to share. But Syrah. So Syrah this one is in Franschhoek, and as we know, it's very hilly. And the reason why Syrah does so well in these hilly environments is because when you have a grape, if you have really nutritious soil, the grapevine will thrive, it will grow loads of grapes. But because that one vine is growing so many grapes, it means that all those grapes are sort of sharing those nutrients. So it's diluting all of these grapes. It's becoming a bit diluted and a bit bland. So when you have high volume wines, they're usually really fertile soil, but a bit bland and drab. This is the opposite. So this one, rocky soils, really, really steep slopes, really hot climate. South Africa is very hot. It's cooled by the ocean because you have the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean meet at the very point of Cape Town in South Africa, which is just nearby. So you get a lot of cooling influences from the ocean. It really cools down South Africa. But 2016, the year for this wine, was such a hot year. It was one of the worst droughts in South Africa's history. They barely had any rain. The river dried up. And Stan and everyone at the Earth Beneath Our Feet thought, this is going to be a really tough year for wine. We don't know if we're going to get grapes out of this. But to their surprise, the Syrah thrived. It did so well from doing this. And it's because when a vine is really, really stressed, it sends out an alert signal. And what it does, it realizes that it can't survive here anymore. So it produces very few, it concentrates all its energy down to very, very few grapes. Barely any grapes, but it makes them the best grapes that you will ever have. And it does this so that animals and birds and people will come along, taste these wonderful grapes, pick all of the grapes, taste them, eat them, carry them away somewhere, and leave the seeds somewhere else. And this is the plant's secret plan all along. So it wants people to pick these grapes up and put them somewhere else. So it wants its offspring little seedling babies to go and have a nicer life on more fertile lands where it can really sort of survive and do really well and thrive. So this is why when you have a really stressed vine, Sounds quite mean to the vine now, doesn't it? When you have a really stressed vine, it means that it's going to produce fantastic, fantastic grapes. And that's what they've done here. 2016, really concentrated. I'll actually show you a picture of the grapes because Syrah is very dark in colour, but this is incredibly dark in colour. Look at those, how wonderful, really nice. So, when we're tasting this wine, what we're going to be looking for is the colour. Syrah is a very, very dark grape variety and it's really concentrated grapes. So what's the colour like in this wine? It should be, from the sounds of it, pretty dark. The way you can look at it with red wine is you can pass your hand through the other side. Look over the top, pass your hand through. If you can see your hand, it usually means it's quite light in colour. If you can kind of see your hand, medium. If you can't see your hand at all, it means it's usually deep in colour. What does everyone think this one is? I think it's, oh, Sam and Charlotte. Oh, they've just said this is our favourite red from all the wine list boxes so far. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sam. This is amazing. I'm so happy. I really like this one, and I think we've had so many like crunchy reds recently. It's so nice to just get a really opposite one, mix it up a little bit. But what does everyone think with colour? Do we all think it's pretty dark in colour? Because I cannot see my hand pass through that at all. Nothing going on behind here. Really sort of deep in colour. You can go even deeper when you have those sort of big Italian red wines. They can be even deeper in colour. This Chateauneuf de Pape, the 97. Actually no, because it's 97, it'll get lighter in colour. The older a wine is, the more it loses its pigmentation. But God, you can get some big, heavy wines deep in colour. So I'd say this is sort of 3/4 of the way up. Very, very deep, but you can go deeper. Tannins on this wine. So tannin is about how much your mouth is drying out as you sip it. Have a sip. Does it feel juicy and light tannin, or is it really drying your mouth out and making you almost need a meal with it? Let me know tannin. But as you're sipping it about tannin, also think about the acidity. So tannin is drying your mouth out, acidity is making your mouth water. It's all about where this balance is. So we already know that Syrah is classically, it's usually pretty big, pretty full for a wine. And when we want to look at our 4-point checklist again with the main one, our balance, are our characteristics balanced? And we're already expecting we've got a deep colour, so we probably know we're going to have a pretty full body as well. But we need to have acidity inside this wine because we've got a nice bit of tannin in there as well. You need acidity to swoop in and balance everything out, because if your tannin is drying your mouth out and you didn't have any acidity, it would feel really unpleasant. So you need a wine, if it's going to have tannin, it needs to have acidity. If it's going to have body, it needs to have acidity. And if it's going to have any sweetness, it also needs to have acidity. Your characteristics always have to be balanced out. So Hannah is saying medium intense colour, yeah. Emma, can't see a hand at all. Me neither. Denise is agreeing, yeah. And then where do you think the tannin and the acidity is on this one? I think it's medium plus on both of them. When we say medium plus, we basically mean about 75% of the way up. Medium plus is like the technical term you use in your wine exams. When you're a bit past medium, not quite full, sort of halfway between those two. A nice medium plus. And I think they balance really nicely. I think the tannin is ever so slightly lower. It's probably more 65% rather than 75%. But acidity, how much do your mouth watering? Do the acidity test. Have a sip, swallow it, open your mouth and tilt your head forward. Should I do it now? That was so much faster than the last one. The last one had that nice sort of 3-second delay and then made your mouth water. This one is a second and whoosh. It's about a 2-second delay. My mouth is really, really watering. But it really needed that because this is such a big full wine that acidity is really saving it. So sweetness with this one is, again, tricky like the last one because it's got such concentrated fruit flavours inside this one. It is, again, dry, this one. So if you said dry, very well done, because there's so much sweet concentrated berries inside it. It can really make you feel like it's almost a sweet wine, but again, dry wine. What I do want to talk about though with this one is, I don't know if you've already looked, but if you don't look at the label, what percentage do you think the alcohol is of this one? The way you do that is by taking a sip and feeling the little burn in your throat here. So you know, like when you drink whiskey and you feel the little burn. It's definitely not going to be as strong as the burn you get with whiskey, but notice that burn. So when you had the last wine, you barely felt anything. With this one, can you feel that burn in your throat? When you do your wine exams, you have to write down the exact number of the percentage without looking at the bottle. And you have to do it just based on that burn in your throat. So you can already tell my throat is really, really burning. If you haven't guessed already, should I tell you the answer now? It is 15% alcohol, this one. It's huge. This is enormous. Can you feel that burn in your throat? Yeah, very good if you have a sore throat. Or if you've just come in from the pub and it's absolutely freezing. This will really warm you up. So a lot of people talk about legs in wine. When you go like this, swirl your glass around and you look at the legs. People talk about that when they want to talk about alcohol percentage in wine, but I completely ignore that because that is a chemical process where it's all about surface tension. So it's about alcohol evaporating on the side of your glass. And it changes completely. It's very unreliable because if you're in a cold room, it'll do it at a completely different rate with the same wine than if you're in a very warm room. So I always ignore legs on wine. Always think about the burn in your throat there. So Tim says, is the sweetness not subjective? It's not subjective, Tim. It's actually very sort of to the point scientific then on this one. It's very much how many grams of sugar. And because we've measured the alcohol, when you make wine, you take grape juice, which is sugar. Yeast eats sugar and creates alcohol. So the yeast is eating all of the sugar. Because it's created so much alcohol, it's 15%. It's not left any sugar inside there. It's all alcohol. And it's just left the residual flavour in there rather than the actual sugar itself. It's just the residual flavour and the smell rather than actual sugar. So our next one, body. Full-bodied, a bit less. You can go fuller-bodied on this one, but it's definitely more than the last one, isn't it? It feels really round, really textured. It feels like almost full fat milk. I'd say this one's definitely 75% again. Does everyone agree? What's everyone thinking? And at the same time, let me know the finish inside your wine. So take a sip, swallow it, count how many seconds you can really taste the flavour for. 10 seconds. Is it 10 seconds? I've put 9 seconds on mine. Really, really long time. 9 seconds. Very long time. And we will look at our flavours. So while you're all writing up your comments, I've asked you about 10 questions at once then. Sorry, I've given you a lot of homework to do there. Whew, I have a glass of wine to get over that. But I really want to talk about flavours because there's so many flavours going on inside this wine. So before, when we were talking about our sort of complexity and our depth of flavour. Depth of flavour is how many flavours you're listing. If you just list a few, it's quite simple. If you list a lot of flavours, it's real depth of flavour, really interesting wine. And complexity is when you get into the second circle. And does this wine have both? Hopefully, hopefully. Paul is finished 10 seconds. Yes, I was exactly the same. 9-10 seconds, yes. And you really like it as well. I'm so glad. I'm really glad you like it. What flavours can you taste inside the wine? You can go complex or fruit with this one. Start with whichever way you want. Oh, I smell like raisins. Denise has said coffee and blackcurrant. Yes. Yeah, really coffee, like hazelnutty coffee. Really warm. I said raisins, and the reason why I've said raisins is I always find when you have cooler climate wines, they feel like crunchy, underripe fruit, really fresh, crunchy. When you have ripe wines, they feel like fresh fruit. And when you have really sort of hot climate wines, they feel like overripe fruit. They're almost being baked fruit or dried out or sort of turning into jam almost. And I feel like this is getting there because it's such a hot climate. And a particularly hot year in 2016, it's really feeling sort of jammy, full, baked. Sam and Charlotte have said hazelnut, leather, vanilla, smoke. Ruth said black pepper and cloves and spice. Yes, I agree to all of them. Cloves, nutmeg, bay leaves, brambles. Yeah, all of those. Georgia said medicinal. Yes. Fruit and nutty. There's so many flavours going on inside this wine. There's absolutely loads. Every time you put your nose back into it, you can smell even more. Oh, coffee. Coffee, cedar and plums. Oh, coffee, cedar and tobacco. Yes. Oh, tobacco. What a wonderful smell inside wine. Not that I really like the smell of tobacco in real life, but inside a wine it's such a... Because it's well balanced, you've got so much fruit flavour with just hints of those little flavours inside. It makes it a really, really lovely smell. It's really enjoyable. And definitely smoke as well. Smoke, plum, blackcurrant, yes, smoke, definitely. Really lovely wine. So, which was everyone's favourite wine between the two? Actually, should we do our verdict on them? On the top, on your tasting card, you have a little verdict. And I'm going to put smiley faces for both. Very smiley faces on these ones. These are really tasty wines. They both have similarities. You can both tell these ones have some really great oak aging. This second one, by the way, it was 18 months oak aging, this one, and you can feel that. It's the body, it's the texture, it's all that complexity coming through from flavours. And because it's 18 months oak aging and then it's had another sort of nearly 4 years after that, it's really sort of gathered up and mustered up all these really interesting flavours and aromas, so you can tell how old this wine is just from that complexity coming out of it. Wonderful, wonderful wine. And thank you so much to Sam for coming to join us. Thank you. And for giving us his wine. It was really delicious. Ooh, Sarah said, don't make me choose between the two wines because you love them both. Well, luckily, Sarah, you can finish both bottles tonight. So you can have both of them. 1 glass each. But I'm so glad you enjoyed it. That is wonderful. But thank you so much to everyone for coming. I do hope you enjoyed it. I loved these wines so much. So I'm glad that you did as well. But send us your photos. I love to see all of your Instagrams. So please do share away with your Instagrams. I like being nosy, to be honest. I just like knowing what you're eating with your wine. Food and wine, best thing together. Oh, Sophia and Sam love the red as well. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. It's a pleasure to have you, as always. And this has been my debut as being Nigella, basically. So watch this space. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much. And send us all any questions that you have that we didn't answer tonight. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.